This is the IDP After Show.
Hey, and welcome back to the IDP After Show Rankings episode. I'm your host, Jase Abbey, and I'm here to bring you the highlights of my Week 9 rankings. We'll be talking about players we like, players we don't, offering some deep dives, and a list of quick hitters at each position. I'm pleased to say that joining me today is one of the classiest IDP analysts you'll ever meet, DynastyTripp, IDP and Dynasty writer and ranker at FootballGuys. Tripp, pleasure to have you with me. How are things?
Good. I appreciate you having me on, Jase. I'm excited to talk some football with you and dig into some ranks. And things are great. And always glad to hop on with anything associated with the IDP guys in Bowling Green, Kentucky. It's great. So looking forward to talking football with you.
For sure. Excited to see the big trades go down this week on the defensive side of the ball?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I always get excited about that, man. I'll be writing an article about that for sure this week, how the fits, and more interestingly, like the vacuum that they leave behind and who backfills that. I find that really fun to break down. So that'll be my piece on reading the defenses. Drops every Friday at footballguys.com. How about you? What was most interesting to you about it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a lover of defense, so I can't wait to see that 49ers defense in action with Chase Young in the fold. I'm kind of pretty excited to see how it all comes together. It's just a shame we got to wait a week to see it happen because they're going to buy.
Stupid bye weeks, a problem.
Stupid bye weeks. But hey, look, there's plenty of stuff to get excited about this week. So let's kick things off by talking about the linebackers that we like. Which linebacker are you high on for Week 9?
Well, I'm not a big fan of soft takes, so I'm gonna jump in here on one of the bigger busts of the 2023 football season for IDPs, and that's Devin White from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He's just really not delivered on the LB1 price, so I'm sure that most drafters took him out. But I like his matchup this weekend with the Texans. They're a team that managed to propel Frankie Luvu to his first really big blow-up week last week with double-digit tackles and sack. I think that White could get back to that. There's a lot of talk about whether or not he's mailing in or something because he's on an expiring contract. He's got about 8 games left to prove that he should be a starter in the NFL. Well, I look at it. He's got to bring it. He's got to get some things done. He still is getting opportunities to rush the passer. I do think that the interior line for the Texans can be exposed through double-A gap blitzing that the Bucs like to do. And this is a team with a young quarterback, and a lot's been made about the fact that he doesn't throw a lot of interceptions, but that's because he plays conservatively. He'll throw short passes, provide opportunities for White to make tackles in the flat, and they'll of course want to try to control the game if they can with running the ball. And Dameon Pierce, so you had a couple of kind of teams with warts and probably evenly matched in some senses, and so I think there's a good opportunity for tackle production in this game. How about you?
Yeah, I like the Devin White call. Like you say, it's just been I really struggle to know where to rank him sometimes because he's one of those guys, lays every down. Like you say, the pass rush opportunities is still there, but the sack production, we knew we probably couldn't rely on it sort of week in, week out. Just hasn't been there this year, and that's really hurt us because a lot of people drafted him really highly, right? So, yeah. For me, my featured linebacker for Week 9 is Jordyn Brooks. He's my LB13, one behind Terrell Bernard and one ahead of Jordan Hicks. I've kind of been waiting on Brooks to assume that larger role in Clint Hurtt's defense for all season. The speed with which he recovered from that torn ACL seemed almost too good to be true. And if you remember, he was initially supposed to be missing a good chunk of the year, considering he suffered that injury only suffered that injury on New Year's Day. So when the reports came out that he joined the team at the beginning of training camp, I was kind of surprised. I don't know about you.
Oh yeah,
but he hasn't had that every down role that we saw him in last year. Wagner's been the only full-time guy in Seattle. And Brooks started out playing only 64% of the snaps. And Devin Bush was was involved in the rotation at the beginning of the year there. So, but last week against the Browns, Brooks was on the field for 95% of the defensive plays, and he had one of his best games of the year, popping off double-digit tackles, a sack, a QB hit, and a forced fumble. And speaking of sacks, he's been on a tear in that sense. He's had 5 in his last 5 games, which is pretty incredible for a guy who only ever had 2 in his first 3 years in the league. We know that's unsustainable. He's blitzing fewer than 4 times a game on average. To put that into context, 44 other linebackers have had more pass rush opportunities. But it's the opportunity for increased tackle production tied to that increased snap share that has me kind of excited for Brooks now that he's in that larger role. With the Seahawks leading the league in zone rate, that's just a good thing for linebackers, coupled with the fact that he's playing the Ravens this week, who allow the highest tackle efficiency to opposition linebackers, something we know about thanks to Mr. Macri's wonderful charts on Twitter. I just think there's a lot to like about Brooks for week 9.
You know, I think it's interesting, and it's like you said, he played that 95% snap share this past week there, which is set his biggest just raw snap number for the season by a mile at 74 snaps. He hadn't even played but 63 so far coming into this game. What I'm interested to see is they get all these pieces together, with that meaning Jamal Adams and Julian Love and the Kobe Bryant coming back and healthy. He was banged up earlier in the year. That I think he's still banged up. The nickel, if they can get him back. I'm interested to see how it all fits together. It just have a lot of depth, and this is something I worried about early in the season too. Early in the preseason is contemplating this defense is how do they get all these guys enough snaps? And so I'm wondering if the 95% is a beginning of permanent situation where they're going to play 2 linebackers all the time, or if that was just a game plan against a Cleveland team that they didn't fear at all over the middle with PJ Walker quarterback. So I think that's really the thing to watch for me. I'm interested to see if like the presence of Mark Andrews and Lamar Jackson compels them to put smaller, faster players on the field this week. I'm really interested to see it. I think it's an interesting take for sure.
For sure, yeah, that's a good point, and definitely something to monitor going into this week. So, Tripp, who are your quick hitters at linebackers? Guys you're not necessarily championing as such, but guys you kind of like the look of for week 9.
A couple other guys that I like to pick up where they left off are Frankie, Luvu, and Demario Davis. Neither of those guys have had super high sustainable tackle ceilings week in and week out, and Demario Davis hasn't since he was a Jet practically. But that being said, I like their matchups this week. Demario Davis is playing the Bears, and I think that the Chargers showed an interesting defensive scheme to slow the Bears down, and they have the young quarterback Tyler Bagent is going to play again, and he wants to attack the middle of the field, and he doesn't want to try to challenge the boundaries. And so that being said, Demario Davis is the coverage backer in the Saints scheme, and I think he's got a good opportunity to pick up where the Chargers linebackers left off last week. The 2 there, Murray and Kendricks, combined for 19 tackles and 2 passes defensed. And so that's right in key with what Davis can do. And Davis gets those blitz opportunities too. And the Bears are a team that'll struggle to protect the quarterback at times. And a young quarterback, you can imagine him losing pocket awareness in a blitz and going down. So I like Davis in particular. Luvu, a good chance to continue. I think he's got the Colts this week, and the Colts just they're going to want to run the ball. Of course, they've got a quarterback that also doesn't challenge the boundaries very effectively. So I like both of those guys to, if folks have gotten frustrated with their floors, I think they're looking at ceiling weeks this week.
Yeah, Luvu's on my list of quick hitters as well. I think he's got a big chance to follow up his big week last week against that linebacker-friendly Colts team this week. I've also got, unsurprisingly, Brooks' teammate, Bobby Wagner, who, of course, also plays the Ravens. Ernest Jones has got a pretty nice matchup against the Packers, and we saw him slightly healthier last week, assuming that bigger role again. And Lavonte David, who faces the Texans, a team that allowed a big week to Luvu last week. Robert Spillane as well. He'll be doing his best to replicate the kind of numbers we saw Quincy Williams and CJ Mosley manage against the Giants last week. And Jordan Hicks, the last guy on my list, he could have a good week against the Falcons team who have allowed top 5 tackle efficiency numbers to opposition linebackers. So that's my quick list of guys that I like. So let's move on to the guys we don't like. Who are you fading this week at the position?
Well, the first guy I'm looking at really two guys are the 2 Falcons linebackers, Kaden Ellis and Nate Landman. And really that has to do with the uncertainty at quarterback across from them. They play the Vikings, who just lost Kirk Cousins to an Achilles injury. And they just traded for Joshua Dobbs, and they have a rookie in Jaron Hall. And what I worry about is will the Vikings be able to possess the football at all? Will they even run 50 plays with their current quarterback situation? And so as a result, I just worry the tackle force are just too low for both Ellis and Landman. Ellis because he's more likely to be the coverage backer of the 2, and Landman because he plays that reduced snap share as the proverbial 2-down guy. So those are both guys that I just got to sit just because the uncertainty of Minnesota.
Yeah, I like the call. I like it for the reasons you mentioned, Dan, because Landman's been good in spots, but I kind of overrated, I think, him last week, forgetting that he wasn't playing anything more than about 80% of the snaps, and while he might have big weeks here and there, whilst playing that number, that will add up over the course of his season. I would need to bear that in mind. So yeah, good call. The guy or guys I want to feature, and I have cheated a little bit here, I'm mentioning a trio, and it's all the Texans linebackers not named Blake Cashman. So Henry To'oTo'o, Christian Harris, and Denzel Perryman. I don't have any of those 3 guys ranked in my top 50 this week. Cashman led the group with a 91% snap share against the Panthers last week. None of the other guys played even half the defensive snaps on offer. We know Perryman kind of saved the day for fantasy managers with a pretty efficient outing, 5 tackles and a sack, but he won't be able to sustain that kind of production unless his involvement increases, right? So if last week was any indication of what's to come, then it appears we've potentially lost a starting fantasy linebacker, as Perryman and To'oTo'o may continue to eat into each other's playing time, and Harris may emerge from the depths to make the situation even worse. And ultimately, we know that's going to affect production. I'm not ruling out the possibility that someone emerges from the pile to earn a large enough role to make them viable in IDP once again. Injuries do occur. Teams change their mind about what they want to do. But for now, I don't trust where this is heading, and I want no part starting any other Texans linebacker other than Cashman for the foreseeable.
Yeah, that's one thing I wonder about Perryman is that they sat him. He practiced in full a couple weeks ago. They sat him because of the club he had on his hand, and I didn't see the game. Is he still wearing that club?
I don't remember.
Okay.
But what concerns me with him though is that there's only been a couple of games where he's played 100%. I know that he's dealt with injuries. But yeah, it's just a messy situation. And until I see something concrete, I'm happy to fade them for other guys who may even play fewer snaps this week. I don't like projecting guys to come from nowhere to play 100%. I'd rather play the guys playing 80, the Nate Landmans of the world. He's more. There's something safer about going with a guy like that than playing that lucky dip with someone like a Perryman, I think.
Yeah, interesting.
So who are your quick hitters at linebacker who you don't like?
Well, a couple more guys that really are affected by the same situation I just mentioned with Atlanta are all the Browns linebackers. First of all, it's hot mess rotation with 4 guys now because Tony Fields got some time playing last week against the Seahawks. But the Browns are playing the Cardinals this week, and they too are in our quarterback uncertainty. So maybe Kyler Murray comes back and maybe they're fine. But even if that's the case, we haven't seen Murray apply. We haven't seen him in this offense at all. It's a new offense, and so I just would not be comfortable rolling out any of these linebackers for the Browns. It seems to me that one or more of them has to be inactive in order for any other of the ones that remain to be an interesting start for me. The last one I've got is Micah McFadden. That's a guy that I think folks are starting to get excited about a couple weeks ago. He's seen declining snap shares in 2 weeks straight. And the Giants see the Raiders this week, and the Raiders are another team that's in quarterback uncertainty. It looks like they have some certainty. They're changing quarterbacks. It looks like they're going to start the rookie Aiden O'Connell. That was not an auspicious outing in his first go, and the offense really seems to have lost its way. They were just simply unable to possess the football against the Lions last week. And the Lions gave them lots of chances to get back in the game, but they just were unable to do it. And so looking at O'Connell out there, I just don't have a lot of confidence they can generate enough opportunities for a part-time linebacker like Micah McFadden to be a useful asset this week.
Yeah, I totally with you on the Browns call. I'm one of those people who was desperate for an LB4 last week, and I went out and got Walker after he played a surprisingly high role the week before, and I got my fingers burned. I should have known better. It's been a really unsettled situation all year. So yeah, like the call. So look, let's talk defensive linemen. Who is the player you want to start us off with here? Guys we like on the defensive line.
Ed Oliver of the Buffalo Bills starting off, and he's going against the Cincinnati Bengals this week and Joe Burrow. And the Bengals seem to be finding their way on offense after a really slow start, but I still see some weakness in the interior and the ability to flush Burrow out the pocket. And so Ed Oliver has finally started to emerge into the player that folks hoped he would be when he was drafted 9th overall 4 or 5 years ago. And Eric Armstead had a couple sacks interior with his first multi-sack game in eternity playing against the Bengals last week. So I think that Ed Oliver is an interesting play, especially in those DT required leagues. I think we do expect the Bengals to run as well, so they'll have some tackle opportunities, even though he's not the highest collector of tackles. I do think he's an interesting play, good opportunity there.
Yeah, I like that. I've got Oliver as my DT5 this week.
Nice.
Yeah, there's only Chris Jones, Dexter Lawrence, Jeffrey Simmons, and Aaron Donald ahead of him on my list. So clearly we're in lockstep on that one. So for me, the featured guy for me on the defensive line, each week I try not to choose the most obvious guys, the sort of undroppable types that everyone knows they're not going to move out of their lineups. And so this week, Max Crosby, Danielle Hunter, TJ Watt, these guys all have really nice matchups this week, by the way. But I'm not going to mention. I want to talk about a guy who people might be a little unsure about, and this guy's stock is definitely down if you believe what you read on Twitter. And it's Joey Bosa, my Edge 7 or DL8 this week, one behind Aaron Donald and one ahead of Rashawn Gary. We all know the knock on Bosa has been his health or lack of it over the years. He's often playing sort of hampered by an injury, and that accounts for why he's not had more than a 60% snap share so far this year since the season opener. But he's been getting healthy again, and his snap share is starting to climb. And this week he faces what I really like is that he's facing a Jets team that is dealing with a lot of injuries on that offensive line. They're missing Dwayne Brown, Elijah Vera Tucker, Connor McGovern, and Joe Tippmann. And that same line has been a turnstile for opposing pass rushers recently. 13 sacks they've allowed in the last 3 weeks. And we all saw what Kayvon Thibodeau and Dexter Lawrence did to them last week, helping the Giants amass 31 pressures in a single game. I think Bosa's set up to have a productive week here, and if he doesn't, then it's on him, not me.
Well, I guess I will be a long-time apologist for Joey Bosa. I'm on board with that call as well. He got a sack last week against the Bears. It's right. His bookend, Khalil Mack, did absolutely just next to nothing against his old team. That must be in a particular format. I have to start a different edge every single week, I'd say. But yeah, I'm with you on Bosa. The Jets are just such a soft matchup. You got to fire those guys up as DL2, DL3 types if you can.
So let's talk quick hitters on that defensive line. Who do you like this week?
So we'll go a couple of deep ones on that. Usually, as you mentioned, there's no point in putting out the soft, the easy ones like Kayvon Thibodeau. Obviously, you start him, and he's got a juicy matchup against the Raiders. But his bookend, Jihad Ward, played over 80% of the snaps last week, and couple weeks ago when I was on the pod with Evan Ronda, I proclaimed Jihad Ward to be the worst starting pass rusher continuously employed for the last 3 years. And that's probably still true. But if you're on the field against the Raiders for 80% of the snaps, you're bound to clean up one of Keion Thibodeau's messes. So that's a deep one that interests me. Another place to go for deep dive is be Keion White in New England. I feel like he's had a couple of moments. He hasn't been consistently good this year, but he was banged up there for a couple weeks ago. He got back last week and played about 80% snap share. He and Anthony Jennings are the only healthy edge rushers that the Patriots have, and they have a pretty nice matchup this week. And so I like Keion White, who Jennings has been in the league for 3 or 4 years now, and it's just he's been playing 80% of the snaps week in, week out, and just not doing anything. And so I think if you're going to take a shot at this matchup and try to get a patron in there, they're playing the Commanders. Sam Howell just loves to eat the ball. Apparently, he gets hungry out there, and so I would be excited to take if I had to. Another thing that's interesting about White is that he has defensive tackle eligibility in some formats, and so that makes him a pretty attractive match play where you need that particular designation in the 5-position leagues. Yeah, the last one I got is David Onyemata. I'm not sure why I'm so focused on defensive tackles this week. I like the odd mollies.
That's good.
Onyemata is probably the best pass rusher the Falcons have. Grady Jarrett's on IR. They're going to. Onyemata's going to play a big chunk of snaps, and they're going to need him to step up against the Vikings. And like we talked about earlier, if the Vikings are having quarterback uncertainty, that seems like a good opportunity to strike.
Yeah, and if the Vikings are strong on their offensive line, it's the offensive tackle position, not on the interior. So that could be a good call. The Keion White one I like as well, especially while Uche is out. I was surprised to see him play 81% of the snaps last week. So, but yeah, like you say, they've got little else. So yeah, a good week to start him if you're in need of maybe like an edge 3, an edge 4, that sort of territory. Yeah, my quick hitters this week on the defensive line, guys, I like. It starts with Alex Highsmith. I like his chances of doing well against the Titans. Their offensive line performed better against the Ravens and the Colts in recent weeks, but the combo of T.J. Watt and Highsmith's a very different proposition to anything the Ravens and the Colts have. Next one, this one's kind of deep. It's by no means a slam dunk, but Christian Barmore is another guy I like this weekend. He's been he's been completely hit or miss, but he couldn't hope for a better matchup against the Commanders this weekend who have allowed the most sacks in the league. And then finally, Boye Mafe. He deserves a mention, I think. He's stepped into a larger role since Uchenna and Owusu went down, and Mafe's been the Seahawks' best edge rusher since. That Ravens offensive line is no pushover, but they allowed a really lackluster Cardinals pass rush unit, 18 pressures last weekend, and then gave up 17 to the Lions the week before. And it kind of surprised me to find that Lamar Jackson was he's tied for 8th in the NFL with 20 sacks so far this year. So yeah, I kind of like Boye Mafe, and I like where he's trending in terms of how he's just purely based on how he's playing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like him too. He seems to be growing.
Yeah. So let's move on to the defensive linemen we don't like. Who don't you like here, Tripp?
I'm going again with a duo, and that's the Miami Dolphins duo of Jaelan Phillips and Bradley Chubb. Bradley Chubb started the season slowly, but has come on lately with a couple big games that people might be starting to get comfortable with using him. Both Phillips and Chubb tend to be pretty healthy in the tackle column too, which makes people feel comfortable with the Dolphins have Chiefs this week. I think that game is in Germany at 9:30 in the morning, so folks need to be mindful of that as they set their lineups. But those are two guys that I'd just be avoiding. But Patrick Mahomes to start taking sacks. Hopefully he won't be sick this week like he was in the last game, which seemed to really hold them back against the Broncos. But I think that both Chubb and Phillips are just too reliant, and any pass rusher would be to an extent, on their coverage. And the coverage has just been weak. They've got to get everybody back and healthy before you can really feel confident of using these guys week in and week out. So these guys are still matchup-based plays to me, and both need to be sat this week.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of Chubb. I never really have been, but Phillips I am a big fan of. But I will concede maybe due to injuries, not really being himself at times this year. But yeah, I am a big fan, but I will again agree with you on the fact that the Chiefs is not a great matchup for any opposition edge rushers, just purely because of Mahomes and his ability to evade pressure. Obviously, the Broncos brought quite a lot of pressure last week, especially Benito, and Browning looked good again in his second game. But like you say, you got to hope, you got to think that Mahomes is going to be a little healthier this week. So yeah, maybe things return to normal, and Phillips and Chubb aren't good plays this week. So my guy here is Mike Danna, edge 28, or DL 39, one behind Jonathan Allen and one ahead of Sam Hubbard. And this might surprise some, considering Danna's been pretty productive. He's produced 6 sacks in 8 games, already a career high in that category. But there's 3 reasons I don't like him this week. First and foremost, I think he's been a bit fortunate to have those 6 sacks, considering he's only produced 22 pressures. His 8.4% pressure rate ranks 62nd out of 77 edge rushers who have had at least 100 pass rush snaps. Second concern is the return of Charles Omenihu. Danna's snap share has dropped from a season high 90% the week before Omenihu returned to 73% in week 7, 68% in week 8. Those aren't horrible numbers, but for a guy who's relied so heavily on huge volume to produce as he has, it does hurt his stock. So that's my second point. Third point, similar to yours with Jaelan Phillips, it's a matchup. He's playing the Dolphins this week. Tua has been sacked only 11 times in 8 games. I feel like if anyone on the Chiefs is going to produce a sack this weekend, it's going to be someone like Karlaftis, maybe Chris Jones, not Danna.
Well, speaking of the quick hitters, I had Karlaftis as one of my quick hitters. I think it's got some of the same methodology as you on the matchup. There was a Karlaftis sighting here, I think last week. I think he had a couple of sacks. But I think the Chiefs' entire strategy this week has got to be focused on mush rush and contain. And I think they'll be relying on trying to limit Chuck plays and disrupt the motions that the Dolphins like to run. Obviously can't disrupt the pre-snap motion very well. Post-snap motions are just as daunting with the speed that Miami's able to put on the field. And, they won't want to do things like get their pass rushers upfield and be caught out of position. And so I think that sacks will come on minimum. The Chiefs defense may still be effective. They may still be able to find ways to lock down the Dolphins, but it won't be because they're sacking 2 or 4 or 5 times. So that's I'm with you. I think you got to sit your Chiefs pass rushes this week if you can. A couple other DLs that I don't like. Trey Hendrickson got nicked up in the last game. I don't like his matchup this weekend against Josh Allen and Bills. Allen doesn't take a lot of sacks. Hendrickson isn't a big tackler anyway. He's been better this year than in years past. But I think he's a great pass rusher, but just nicked up and against the Bills, I don't want any piece of that. And the last one I got is Jonathan Greenard or Bernard. Not sure how to pronounce it. One of those. Whoever he is, he's had a couple of huge outbursts with the Texans playing opposite Will Anderson. And that entire defense has been a lot better this year under the coordination of the new head coach there, D'Amico Ryans. Who came over from San Francisco. I think that Will Anderson is probably still a better player. But Bernard, in the matchup that he's got this week, I'm not excited to get him out there. He's nice to have if you have him in the best ball. I'm not sure if I'll ever get comfortable enough to start him in 2 leagues of technical depth this year. And maybe I'll just have to eat crow at the end of the season. The ratings go on. Those are my sits.
Interestingly, I've mentioned his teammate, Will Anderson. He's a bit of a red flag for me this week. Obviously, he'll be playing more on the other edge, so we'll go up against sort of Luke Goedeke, who didn't have his best week last week, it has to be said, allowed something like 5 pressures, but he's one of the better pass blocking offensive tackles this year. And again, Baker Mayfield has only been sacked 11 times. So yeah, don't like the look of Will Anderson this week, or Greenard for the same reasons you mentioned. I also want to mention Arnold Ebiketie. I know he's kind of come alive in the last 3 games, 3 sacks over that span, but unfortunately for him, again, matchup, the Vikings, those offensive tackles, Darisaw and Brian O'Neill, I think underrated. They've managed to shut down a few pretty good edge rushers at times this year. Better players than Ebiketie, certainly. But I will say, going back to what we mentioned earlier on, that QB change could change things. It did give me pause for thought in mentioning Ebiketie, actually, because you can't imagine a situation where Hall just doesn't have that pocket presence of someone like a Kirk Cousins, and he may struggle back there in his first start. And the last guy I want to mention is Kwity Paye, and he's been one of the biggest disappointments for me so far this year. His matchup isn't terrible against the Panthers, but I really hope to see so much more from him by this point in the season. My confidence in him is just really shook. Don't know how you feel about Paye, Tripp.
Yeah, he's got off to a pretty good start this season. He hasn't been able to sustain it at all. I'm really impressed with him as a run defender. He's just such a brute out there, but the opportunities aren't there. And Gus Bradley's defense is a defense that they want you to get upfield, and Ebukam has just proved to be the better fit so far this year in that defense. And so, yeah, I'm not excited about Paye either. It's a guy that would need to be a strong matchup for me to consider starting him.
Got it. So look, I mean, okay, last but definitely not least, let's talk about a position group I know you feel passionately about, Tripp, the defensive backs. So DBs we like. Who are you keen on here?
Well, I hope you have another 45 minutes left. We can talk about DB for a while. Kidding. I did. I'm gonna go back with a guy go with the guy that I wrote about last week at Football Guys, and a guy that I just can't quite give up on, and maybe because it's the type of defensive back that he is, but that's Jamal Adams of the Seattle Seahawks. He played 100% of the snaps 2 weeks ago, didn't quite play that last week. We talked a little minute ago about how we thought, we break it down, but we had concerns about how snaps would break down with all the bodies that the Seahawks have, especially with all the healthy coming back healthy now defensive backs. But I like Adams a lot. He's a guy that's he's not going to play deep. He's a guy that's playing closer line, that's going to scrimmage, either slot or box. He's still going to have opportunities to rush the passer. They seem to have a plan last year to how to deploy him, and it's the same defensive coordinator this year. It seems like everything they get out of Jamal Adams is really a bonus, but so far he's played 2 healthy snap shares and come out healthy, which is obviously the key for Jamal Adams. But I watched a little bit of tape on him last week, and his movement looked good. He looked smooth out there. His field awareness continues to be good. I don't know if he started off his career as a really good player, but I do think that he grew and developed over time, and I do still think that there's a good player there. And so playing the Ravens, I think that's a good matchup for tackle production. You got Mark Andrews as the tight end, and a team that is attacking the middle of the field and will provide tackle opportunities to both linebackers and safeties. So that's my start of the week for defensive backs.
Yeah, it's interesting because I had two names penciled in here. I couldn't decide between the two, and the only deciding factor was that slightly reduced snap share that you mentioned at the top there. 85% doesn't scare me. He's a guy who I think can remain productive despite playing 15% fewer than some of these other guys. And I've warmed to Adams this year. I like how he started in that one game where he played about 9 snaps before he suffered the concussion. Yeah, and like you say, since he's come back, he's had three healthy snap shares of 80% plus. So yeah, I almost mentioned him here, but I pivoted to this guy. So my guy this week is Jordan Poyer. He's my safety and DB 15, one behind Jalen Petre and one ahead of Jason Pinnock. I just really like what we're seeing from Poyer lately. Josh and the guys talked about him on the week 8 recap. We know he'll never lead safeties in tackle volume, and in that sense, his weekly floor is a little lower than some of these other guys like the Cam Bynums, the Cam Curls, Julian Blackmons of the world. But Poyer has been doing his best impression of those guys in the last few weeks. 18 tackles, 18 combined tackles over that period. And what Poyer offers that some of his peers, certainly Curl, doesn't, is big play production. Now that usually means for him splash plays in sort of pass defense. So we're talking interceptions and pass breakups, but obviously those interceptions have been pretty absent this year. But he did break up 2 passes against the Bucs last week, and he had a sack and a forced fumble against the Patriots the week before. What I like about him, though, as well, is that the Bills are playing the Bengals, and we know that's a good matchup for opposition safeties. Last week, when facing the 49ers, Talanoa Hufanga tied his season high in tackles with 10, and it should have been more were it not for the missed tackles. And even Tashawn Gibson had 7. his best of the season so far. I think Boye has a really good shot at following in those guys' footsteps and having a good game himself.
Nice. Yeah, I'm looking at FootballGuys.com scoring, and he's 11th over the last 4 weeks in scoring. So definitely a player who's on the upswing, who I tabbed as our preseason was having good potential to rebound, and was a bit disappointed for the first few weeks. But it's a good call. I hadn't really thought too much about him since then. So I like that.
Yeah, he's one of those guys that does just seem to kind of disappear for short periods and then just comes back with a bang, and you're sort of sat there wondering why you dropped him. But like I say, low weekly floor, but a pretty high ceiling, and those interceptions will come. He's been so good at that over the course of his career, so it's just a question of when, really. This could be the week, you never know. But I'm choosing him really here for that safe weekly floor that I think his matchup against the Bengals really gives us. So let's see what happens. Again, I, like you, might be eating crow here, but we'll see. So have you got any other safeties that you want to mention in the quick hitter section that you're keen on this week?
Well, I'm interested to see if Justin Reed can do something this week. I mean, he may be stuck in a too high scenario where he just doesn't sniff within 15 yards of the line of scrimmage. But, the Dolphins are also attacking downfield a lot. So they're, you got Tyreek Hill running around there catching the ball 20 yards down the field all the time. Somebody's got to tackle him. So but Justin Reed also has opportunities to play in the box and blitz occasionally too. So I'm interested to see what Kansas City brings. They might try to show the Dolphins as much movement and interchangeable pieces as the Dolphins offense watches the Chiefs defense. So I just kind of have a thought that maybe Reed will break out this week. A couple of Cowboys on here, both Jaron Kearse and Donovan Wilson have been lost from fantasy standpoints, in part because the Cowboys have been so effective at getting off the field. The tackle opportunities just really haven't been there, but they're playing the Eagles. They're playing the Eagles. So the Eagles give up more tackles to safeties than anybody by a healthy margin. And without any, we have just the one linebacker there, Damone Clark, and you have nothing but safeties. The Cowboys are just playing dime all the time behind that. These are the two guys that play the most snaps. And unfortunately, they too are like Jamal Adams, where you can't guarantee that they'll play 100% of the workload. But both guys are out there. Both guys blitz. Both guys, Jaron Kearse, 6'4", 215 pounds. He gets his hand on the football when he's in coverage against tight ends. He'll be looking at Dallas Goedert this week. So those are a couple of guys that I think have opportunities to be useful. Julian Blackmon is like the safety 4 in football guys scoring. I know it's a little bit different than the big 3 scoring, but nice matchup again this week with Panthers. And then the last two guys I'd mentioned are the two Cardinals, Baker and Thompson. People probably have forgotten about them because they haven't been healthy a lot this year, but they're back at starting in the back end of the Cardinals defense. They're going to be looking at a Browns defense, which also feeds a lot of fantasy points to safeties. And again, with their situation on offense, they may find themselves out there a good bit. The Cleveland Browns run more plays per game than any other team in the league. So I like their opportunities to compile tackles.
Yeah, just to touch on the Donovan Wilson point, I'm desperate to see him get back to playing that kind of role that we saw him play last year. Not the role, but the size of the role that we saw him play last year when he was such a good fantasy player. Like you say, they just got so many options there that they can afford to, sub guys in and out every now and again. But yeah, I do like the matchup, and I like the rest of them as well. Topping the list for me is Kyle Hamilton. It was just nice to see him bounce back from that mini slump to put up double-digit tackles against the Cardinals. He's still some way short of where I hoped or where I thought he might be as we approach the midway point of the season, but I kind of like his chances of putting another good performance against a team who we know are friendly for opposition safeties. So it's the Seahawks. Jamal Adams and Quandre Diggs combined for 16 tackles against Seattle last week. And although it's barely worth mentioning given the inability to predict such things, Julian Love also chipped in with an interception as well. So there's that. I also want to mention Cam Taylor-Britt and Kenny Moore to give some corners some love. Two corners who have been pretty productive over the course of the season so far, albeit in different ways. Both have great matchups this week against the Bills and the Panthers. So DBs we don't like. The last segment of the show, Trip. Let's finish strong. Give me a DB who you don't like, who you hate, in fact, this week. Putting words in your mouth.
It chagrins me to hate Grant Delpit this week, but I've got to do it. It's in part because of the situation with the Cardinals offense. I mean, it's interesting to think about the fat number of tackles that the Ravens safeties put up playing the Cardinals last week. I don't have any confidence that the Cardinals will be able to possess football this week, playing with Clayton Tune, the 5th round rookie, I think he is. All right, so Delpit has been a guy who's been a bit of a disappointment. Jimmy, I keep hoping they'll turn it on. I think the usage has been good. You'd be playing the back end of a good defense. You would hope that he would produce more big plays, and maybe those are coming. That may be, the counterpoint to what I'm saying is here. Maybe Delpit has the opportunity to create some big plays against this offense. The whole team is just remarkably devoid of talent. But I just can't bring myself to start Grant Delpit this week. And as in leagues where I have, this might be the first week where I just have stopped thinking of him as a set it and forget it type player.
Yeah. I mean, the Cardinals have been pretty good for opposition safeties so far, but like you say, that change at quarterback could change everything. So I don't disagree. For me, I've got two for you here. It's DeMonte Casey and Keanu Neal. They both sneaked into the back end of my rankings this week. I think I've got one in the low 60s and one in the 70s. Obviously, Minka is not playing due to that hamstring injury, but both of these guys face a Titans team who typically don't give up many tackles to opposition safeties, even after Richie Grant and Jessie Bates did pretty well against them last week. Casey and Neal are not Grant and Bates. And while they may luck into doing better than I anticipate, I wouldn't want to play either guy this week unless I was desperate. And I'm rarely desperate at the DB position. There is this nagging doubt, like you mentioned with Tune, that if there may be a change in terms of how friendly the Titans are for opposition safeties with a new quarterback at the helm in Will Levis. So that's kind of like a nagging doubt in the back of my mind, but it's not enough of a doubt to change my mind. So I'm fading Casey and Neal this week.
And then finally, I got to choose the two Falcons safeties which matched a minute ago. Boy, they had a rough game against Tennessee, but they're playing Minnesota. We talked a little bit earlier about my concerns about Vikings' ability to possess the football, and so I'd be sitting both of those guys if I can help it.
Yeah. And just to add to that list, there's a whole bunch of defensive backs I don't like this week. Really quickly, Devin Witherspoon had an amazing start to his career. I hate to bet against him, but he's been quiet the last few weeks, and his matchup against the Ravens is pretty rubbish. They average about 9.5 tackles to the entirety of the opposition team's cornerbacks each week, and that, if that trend continues, then he'll need a big play to put up big numbers. And considering Jackson's only thrown 3 interceptions, I don't fancy Witherspoon's chances. And then this is low hanging fruit, but Terrell Edmonds, 25% snap share in his first game for the Titans. That's nowhere near enough. And Brandon Jones, who I think I wanted to mention because some people may leave him in their lineups after last week, but I saw Javon Holland cleared concussion protocol just today, I think it was. So we know Jones has only been playing when either Deshaun Elliott or Holland have not been playing. So yeah, you can drop him to benches and probably drop him from your roster for now.
Yeah, it's amazing how fungible the safety position can be, isn't it? I've been in a league with 70 roster spots, 16 teams, all IDP, all defense. And Duron Harmon wasn't on anybody's roster and played 100% of the snaps last week. So you can't tell me there's just no such thing as a league that's too deep when there's not an option anyway.
Oh, most certainly. It's the same. It's the same every week. And yeah, Blackmon there's no better example in terms of that than Julian Blackmon. He was on nobody's radar to start of the year. And, he's playing in that sweet spot. Like you say, he's been way outperforming all of our predictions. So yeah, you can stream these guys. We talk about it most weeks. We both do the same. And, you're a master of DBs, Tripp. So if you're saying that, then we should sit up and take notice, right?
Okay, can't say so.
So look, I mean, sadly, that about does it for this episode, Tripp. It feels like it's flown by. Thanks for coming on. big fan of your work. I've been looking forward to having you on, and just to listen to your always very carefully considered analysis and takes on all things IDP. Speaking of your work, can you please share with our audience where to find you and your content?
Oh, sure. I'm at DynastyTripp on the app formerly known as Twitter, and over at FootballGuys.com, writing and ranking, and got, like I mentioned, that weekly article, Reading the Defense, and I'll be digging into some trade ramifications and seeing if we can't find any diamonds in the rough behind it too. So I appreciate you having me on. I've really enjoyed speaking football with you. I always enjoy your work over at the IDP show, and I strongly recommend folks subscribe to all the pods and the content over there on the Substack website that y'all have. It's just, y'all do great work there.
I'll reciprocate. I mean, go and follow and support Tripp. You won't be disappointed. I should remind everyone that I'm on X at Jase Abbey, and my weekly rankings are available on our site at theidpshow.com. And for this week only, they're available to everyone. So whether you're a paid supporter or not, please take the time to drop by and check them out. In the meantime, we hope you enjoyed the show, and I'll be back again next week. Bye.
This was the IDP After Show.